Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Mark My Words. So today we're joined by Gillian from Finance for Enterprise. Hello, Gillian.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. So could you tell us first about who you are and what you do, please?
Right, well, my career started with Barclays Bank a long time ago, and I won't mention how long. And while I was at Barclays, I did a customer facing role, and that evolved into working with small businesses from there. So I worked at Barclays, they trained me a lot in small businesses, sent me on a lot of courses. Um, And so in 2009, I took a redundancy package and I worked for a company called Urban Biz that were based in Doncaster. We were lucky at that time in Doncaster, there was a Success Doncaster programme, and Urban Biz were part of that. And I was delivering business support, generic business support to the BME community. And then from there, the role that I eventually applied for, the company I work for now, Finance for Enterprise, but it was Donback, and the role was finance and funding advisor, and it was to get people finance ready. So I was helping with cash flows, so it was, rather than being the generic one, when I moved away from Barclays, I deliberately wanted to do something more generic than just keep down the finance route, but that's where I was going back to, if you like. So it's obviously what I do. And so it was helping people with that, and then the roles just evolved from there when Startup Loan Scheme started 10 years ago. But there is still an element of that where you're helping people get finance ready, helping with cash flows and business plans and things like that. So that's sort of my background.
So kind of a lot of work with sort of startups and
Mm.
new businesses. So what do you think are the key challenges facing business startups, especially in these
It's,
turbulent
yeah,
times?
massively the uncertainty with the economy. But people are brave, and people, you know, you've got to have a lot of resilience really, and a self-belief in yourself in what you're going to do. Some people are, some people aren't. I worked with a lady in the summer who was going to set up doing cakes, and she then changed her mind because of the uncertainty. And you can see that when, I mean, another problem sometimes is locating premises, but if you do locate them premises, then an issue is you've got to generate enough to cover. If it's a type of business that does need premises, you've got to locate them, and sometimes that can be quite difficult, locating suitable premises. But then when you have, you've got to think long and hard about taking premises on, because that is an overhead for you month in, month out. And then the next sort of difficulties at minute, really, and these are at any time, no matter what state the economy is in, is cash flow and funding, and getting the cash flow there. I still see applications sometimes where people think, oh, I'll spend every penny I want to borrow. I don't want to see that. I actually want to see that you're leaving a little bit, borrow a bit more, and so that you've got some cash flow for that rainy day for if something's around the corner. So I'd say they're the three things. I mean, at the moment, it's just unprecedented times. 10 years I've done this, I've never seen anything like it. But people are still being brave, and people, there are still areas which people are very positive to go into, which is like haulage and
Mm.
courier deliveries. Still see lots of applications for those. People are, quite confident, it seems, in those sort of areas, but some other areas, not seen many hospitality businesses for the last couple of months, and you can understand that and get that. Nobody knows what's after Christmas in particular. I think what's going to happen.
I guess people would tend to start a business that they're passionate about or got an interest
Mm.
in, or so yeah, it is important you kind of do your homework, isn't it, and
Yeah.
test the market and really understand those numbers rather than just dive straight in, as it were, and make sure there's a market there. Okay, so what sort of key bits of advice or tips would you give to new business owners that want to be successful?
I think, like I just said about resilience, you've got to have a bit of a thick skin. And also, it's quite lonely sometimes. So you've got to be quite self motivating. You've got to be really determined. And you've got to have the ability to change direction, but not too quick. You have got to give something a chance, but then you've got to recognise pretty quickly this isn't working. And a phrase that sort of I've started hearing in the last year really is, I've pivoted my business and I've changed direction. It's kind of a new phrase. I've not heard it until about 12 months ago. And I think they're the key things, that because it is, you know, if you can start your business working from home, it's great because you will keep your costs down and you'll test it and you'll test your numbers. Then sometimes just sat at home on your own, you know, it can be quite lonely. And you've also got to find your own motivation then. So you have got to be very passionate about it. And sometimes it means you don't have people to bounce ideas off of as well. So you've got to think about all these sort of challenges, and, you know, offsetting the other. And I'm a better hire in a little office space somewhere, because then I could just wander down corridor and ask somebody's advice, or I'm a better saving money and just
Yeah.
working from home. So
Thank you. All those points sound very familiar to me as well.
yeah.
And I think for me, that's why it's important to have a bit of a plan about where you're going to. Importance of having mentors and coaches to speak to, and also that's why I quite like networking and a member the Chamber of Commerce locally, because again, surrounding yourself with other
Yeah.
business owners to get out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it can be isolating, especially if it's you or one or two other people. Yeah, thank you. So I guess over your vast career, you must have worked with literally hundreds of business startups. I'm not being rude here.
I have.
So
So, you
is there
know,
any particular that stand out for any reason, or that might be particularly unusual, that just, you know, that you just sort of remember?
well, I don't know if it's because of the timing of it. It was the first business I worked with when we went into lockdown. And suddenly the whole world had tipped on its head, because for me, prior to that, I used to go and meet every single applicant, right? I physically couldn't do that now because I look after all the applications that we get. But it changed the way I worked, and suddenly I had to work with people by doing a phone call. And the first one was a business that is out at Sheffield, and it's called the Steel Cauldron, and it's a wizardry cafe. And I'd never come across anything like it before. They'd really done their homework and research, and they knew where the others were in the UK and things like that. And there's certain bits they use that are linked to Harry Potter, and they've had to have special permission and things like that, and get trademark things and stuff. But it was really lovely when we came out of, be about 2 years ago, as we came out of lockdown. We were just about going into the November one. Well, in the October, I actually went and visited the place, and obviously Halloween, wizardry, it were absolutely brilliant. And we did a feature about it, and it's on our website. And I was there, just talking. It was a couple, and I was talking to the woman. And what was lovely was, she said her husband had never met somebody who was like in financial position, who was so interested in his business. He said they've had other businesses before, and he'd never met somebody who took so much interest. Now, I do think part of that was because the way I was having to work was changing. So I probably was asking a lot of questions, but that one sticks out, as I say, partly because of the timing of it. I had to learn to work differently, and partly just because they had a very strong vision of how they wanted this place to be, because they were telling me it was all going to be reclaimed furniture, and I'm thinking, what's it going to look like? Because they couldn't give me quotes for things. When I went, it looked amazing. It were all these old sideboards that you'd see that your granny had and things like that, just pulled together absolutely brilliant. And it was amazing. It really, really was. And they'd put it had got some rooms you can even stay upstairs. So it was really, really good how they pulled it all together and done an awful lot of work on it. And that sort of is, you know, a standout one. But it is great when you see people, you know, you go afterwards and you see people and it's been successful. You know, they've had this dream, and sometimes they've had to give up things in order to get there. And it is lovely. But no, that would be the one, really, the standout one. And I'll say what helped was we did a PR about it. And a few times they videoed as well. So I was there a little bit longer while they were taking and retaking things, and I had a good look round, and it was nice to just see how they'd set it up. And what was interesting was they'd really budgeted, because the money they'd had from me, they'd really squeezed every penny out of it, if you like,
Mm.
got it to where this place needed to be. When I looked round, I was like, they've done well. So I'd say, yeah, budgeting's, going back to what we were talking about earlier, budgeting's really important.
Knowing your market, it sounds
Yeah.
like, in that market research.
Yeah.
And I know I've enjoyed reading about other businesses that you work with on the LinkedIn page. So I know
Yeah.
Float Space in Thorn, that the
Yeah.
float tank. As a result of that, I've been a couple of times. It's
Have you?
amazing.
Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely
Well,
recommend it.
I must be getting the Float Space champion at that, because I've also done one in Sheffield and one in Glasgow. But yeah, it was Peter was the first one, and Peter had issues around the roof on the premises, so it took a little bit longer. Went to visit him, and I do keep meaning to go, but I'm a bit about the roof over me. I think I'd feel a bit claustrophobic, but it's fantastic what he's done. And again, it's back to the research and the market.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was really passionate about that Peter.
Oh, I definitely recommend it, and you can
Yeah,
open the lid if you want to, so you're in control. But yeah, for those that haven't heard it, it's a bit like, I call it a bit like meditation. So you're
yeah.
literally floating in a bit of water, I suppose, and it's so relaxing.
How Peter described it to me, he said it's like Dead Sea, isn't it? Is it Dead Sea?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah, it's full of Epsom salts. He says, so you'll float. But what amused me about that one was our PR guy, Matt, said he spent the first 20 minutes trying to sink. That defeated the object a little bit, I suppose. He said, I would have told you, so you can't, you're going to sink, you're going to sink. And he started
yeah,
doing that. But yeah, there has been some really interesting and different businesses. There was one's just won an award, actually, the Garrison out at Wickersley. He and again, really brave, because the guy from there set up 2 years ago when we were in the lockdown. So we were coming out and we were having the eat out to help out, and then
yeah,
suddenly hospitality had its carpet pulled from under it again, didn't it? Because we shut in November, it's
yeah,
the busiest time of year. And I really felt for him, and I said, I bet you wish to integrate your loan, don't you? And he said, no, never, never. I'm going to come out of this. We're going to, and he again pivoted his business and he started doing takeaways, and then he's come out since, and it's absolutely amazing. It's a brilliant business. And I say, I just saw on LinkedIn or Facebook recently, they went to some award and they won it, and it's really good. I just wish it were a bit closer, because it's a bit expensive in a taxi home from Wickersley, because I'd like to go.
brilliant. Okay, lovely. So thank you for that. I think that's really useful, kind of a bit of advice, bit of tips, and just hearing about some of those stories as well. So I guess the main thing I wanted to ask you about is the startup loans that you kind of offer and sort of manage.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about what's available, how it works? Yeah, anything that would be useful to people listening to this.
Just give you a quick background to the programme. It started literally 10 years ago, I think, this year. And Fans for Enterprise, as we were done back then, we were one of the original delivery partners of it. And what they mean is, by delivery partner, you're delivering at grassroots, if you like, locally. So you know your local area and things like that. So they set the scheme up, and the idea is to, as it says, it's to help startups, but also early stage. And it's anybody trading up to 3 years can apply. So the initial stage, I would say there's like three parts to it. You register, and you do that on your own. It's between you go on your computer, you register. Then if you get through that stage, you're passed to a local delivery partner such as ourselves to work with. And then the final stage is when we've worked together and hopefully I've got it agreed and we've got it over the line, and you get your offer letter and the money, and that's dealt with by somebody else. So initial stage, I always send clients who I speak to a link, and that link ensures that they come back to us. It's via our website. So they click on that and they register. And at that stage, it's just the basic things that you would expect when looking for a loan. So your name, address, telephone number, date of birth, things like that. Pretty straightforward things. So you register. There's a couple of stages to it. They do ask you at that stage for your business plan or cash flow. But I always say to people, even if you've got one, don't bother, just click, I need help with this. Just get to the end of the registration and the application and click submit, because what that will generate is they will do, Startup Loans do a credit reference search on every applicant. Now, if you don't have to have a whiter than white credit report or credit search. In fact, I was speaking to a guy yesterday, we got on about, he'd already applied. People, before they register, I have a conversation and they say, I've not got very good credit. And I said, well, I don't really know. I can't say to you, because I literally am kept out of that part. All I know is that if you've got 2 CCJs that are quite recent and 2 or 3 defaults where you've been late paying, say your Barclay card or something like that, or some car finance, then you might be straight away declined. But the only thing I can say to people, unless they know that they've got absolutely, they're in an IVA or they've got 3 or 4 CCJs, and I'd say don't bother applying. But if they're a bit unsure, I say I can't say for certain. You just need to register. Startup Loans will do the search, and then they'll decide straight away if you declined at that point for the credit search, and it'll go no further. If you're okay, they then pass you to me to work with. Once you've got through that process and been passed to me, then we work together on the rest of what we need. And it's like I said, I always need a business plan, cash flow forecast, and a personal survival budget as a minimum, right? Sometimes startups will ask for ID, sometimes they'll ask for proof of address. That's usually if somebody's moved address recently that they have to ask for proof of address, because you might not quite be on the voters roll at your current address. Sometimes they ask for proof of bank as well, because when you do register, they ask you to put your personal bank details in and they do a check. Startup Loans then determine if I need anything more, and it might be that I need personal bank statements and quotes as well. So we just take it from there, and I work very much on the client's agenda, if you like, that it's their time scale. That said, when they get things to me, everything to me, I try and work on it as quickly as I can, but in the order that things are received. And that's really it. We to and fro a lot, me and the client, just so that I can get a full understanding of the business, bit of background, what their experience is, if they're working full time in the business or going to carry on working and things like that, just all, contribute to my assessment, because then the process is what we're aiming to do is then get to the point where I can write a recommendation, an assessment of this loan, and it goes to a second assessor in our office. But as I always say, it's not a couple of lines going, yeah, I think this is all right. I have to cover everything. I have to do a full sort of summary of the business, the applicant, whether the cash flow will take some stress testing. So if income went down and charges went up, by what percentage can it tolerate that? If it's an existing business that somebody's buying, because you can use the scheme for that, is it profitable? Are they looking to increase sales by a huge amount in their cash flow and things? And if so, what's the justification? There's quite a lot of things I have to look at depending on the scenario of the business, the questions it throws at me. But it's always a minimum of about 4 or 5 questions that I have to answer. And then I have to do a summary at the end, sort of summarising why I've come to that recommendation. So it's to get me to that point. Sometimes it can seem a little bit like I'm being a bit nosy, but I'm not.
Curious, yeah.
Yeah.
So how much can people borrow? And is it right? It's against them as an individual. Is that
Yes.
right? Yeah.
It's a personal loan for business use. The minimum is 1,000, I think. I'm not sure if it's 500 or 1,000, to be perfectly honest. I think it's 500. Generally, don't see many below 1,000, but you do sometimes. And then the maximum's 25, but it's on a needs basis. I mean, I do get an awful lot of applications for 25,000, and then when I sit down and look at it, it's like, you actually need 10. Oh, well, I thought I'd just put in for 25 and things like that. So, you know, I don't want to saddle people with debt. So it's what they need. But on the other side of it, I mean, I did have somebody apply last week for 800. When I talked it through to her and got to know what her aspirations were, she wants to launch some new products January, February time. So I said to her, you ought to have the cash flow already for those products, because with the loan, you can come back for a second loan, but it's only 6 months after you've drawn the first one. So you'd have to wait 6 months. There's that side of it. What we can also look at doing, which is very good, we can do what's called tranche the loan, right? So the first loan, if somebody is unsure how much working capital they're going to need, so rather than borrow 15, when you think, I've got costs of 8, I don't know how much working capital really I'm going to need. So it might be we look at doing 10 straight away, and then it's already in place that after 3 months, provided they met 3 monthly repayments, they can draw down another 5, and it's just a case of filling a self-declaration form in that I send to them. So the beauty of that is they're only paying for 10. And if after the 3 months they think, actually, I don't need it, they still only pay for 10. They're not paying for 15 unnecessarily. So we can look at ways of structuring the loan to do that. And like I said, they can apply for a second loan after 6 months. But with that, they do have to register again, redo a cash flow, redo a person's survival budget and things like that. There's a little bit more work of an assessment. That's not pre-approved, if you like, where the tranching the loan is.
What are the repayments and the interest rates like comparable to high street stuff?
Yeah, there's no fees for a kick-off. So if you went into a bank for, I know this is a personal loan, but it's for business use. So if you went to a bank and asked for a business loan, you'd always have to you'd be charged a lending fee, 1-2%, something like that. Might call it arrangement fee, but it's the same thing really. And then also you get charged ongoing maintenance fees every year, renewal fee and things like that. There's none of that. And then also, if you know you have a payment bounce, a bank will charge you for sending you a letter to tell you it's unpaid. There's none of that. There's no fees whatsoever. And the good one is there's no early repayment fees. So if you are in a good, strong position and you want to pay it back early, then, because I don't know if I mentioned when we're talking amounts, you can take the loan between 1 and 5 years. So if anybody's taking anything 5k or above, I do tend to say take it over 5 years. Keep your payments low at the outset. You can always pay extra, and you can always pay it back early with no repayment penalties, which is good. And the interest rate, all you pay is the interest rate of 6%, which again, I'm not 100% certain what banks are charging at the moment, but I would imagine it's something in the region of about 18% at least, which is 3 times that. And that's if you could get a loan from the bank, a startup loan. Some of them do, provided you've got 50% to put into the project. So if you've got a project cost of 20 grand, they'd say they'll look at it, provided you've got 10 to put in. Not everybody has or want to. So if you can apply to startup loans for your full project cost. There's no deposit that you have to put in. I mean, if you've got something to put in, great. It shows some commitment, but it's not necessarily part of it.
Okay, so you're based in Doncaster in South Yorkshire, so people listening to this might be literally all over the country. So how might they take advantage or look into this scheme? Do you cover wider? Is there, local partners, or how would that work?
You can do, really, this is where COVID sort of changed what we do, because like I said, I used to go out and meet every single client, and now we don't. We tend to do things like this by Zoom or by telephone calls. So somebody can be anywhere in the country. When we mentioned the float spaces, I've just done 2 for Glasgow. So that was all done, obviously, via telephone. It's entirely up to an applicant what they want to do. The scheme runs nationwide, and there'll be local delivery partners. There's also some what we call national partners, like Virgin Startup, people like that deliver nationally. So you can work with them. It might be that you would prefer, if needed, the opportunity to meet somebody face to face. It might be that you just prefer to work with somebody over at telephone. So it's really down to applicant, and they can either go to a local one, or they can just go on our website and register with me. It's whichever is best for them, really, because that's what we always like to do. I mean, we're based in Doncaster, cover sort of South Yorkshire, down possibly Chesterfield. We've also got an office in Grimsby, so we cover that side of the Humber. But it's like I say, I've dealt with people. I did car garage recently in Buckinghamshire, and then following week I was doing somebody, looking after somebody in Glasgow. So can do all over country, really.
And the website is finance-for-enterprise.co.uk. Finance-for-enterprise.co.uk. Lovely.
I like our items.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to tell us, either about the scheme or anything else in your sort of startup supporting role?
I think I didn't mention as well that, as I said, you can trade in up to 3 years, which is important. So somebody might not need it today, but they might need it a year or 2 down the line when they've started, and also hopefully when this economy is starting to grow a little bit, you might get some more confidence to feel you want to borrow money. But then for the second loan, you can be trading up to 5 years. So you can have had your loan and then top it up. It can be within, as long as you're within your 5 years of trading. So there's that. About other things, really, we just try and do genuinely what is best for the client, and place it what is best for them. We do, end of the day, we're not judge and jury. I might get an application in and think, I'm not sure this is going to go, but if everything stacks up and they've done the research, am I to say whether I'm right or wrong? I have got things wrong. So that's how we try and look at things, for clients, and just put the client at the centre of it.
Right. Thank you very much. And I always ask my guests if there's anything you'd like to ask me, which I don't know what's coming. So yeah.
Well, I've just always wondered, Mark, what's your background? Because obviously I met you when you were at Chamber.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, sort of prior to that, I do think you've run your own business a couple of times, haven't you? Which I think is always useful when you're doing what you're doing, because you've actually worn the t-shirt. Now, I haven't myself, but my husband has. My husband used to be a self-employed tiler. And I think when you've done that, it does give you a little bit more empathy with clients, and you really do understand it. But I'll put my hand up, I'm not brave enough, to be self-employed, and I say that to people. I want to know I'm getting paid at end of month, and that's,
yeah.
I'm a bit more of a coward, if you like, and that's how I am. But my husband were self-employed tiler for quite a few years, and so I do, when I'm talking to people, understand about getting cash in on time, balancing robbing Peter to pay Paul. Sometimes it's a lot of what it's like. In fact, I have this conversation with our assessors, and I'll say sometimes, whoa, your blokes in suits that's worked for banks, it's a whole different startup. and small businesses. And I just wondered what your sort of background was before Chamber,
Mm.
when you know.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So yeah, so I've been running Make Your Mark for 5 years, just gone in October. But prior to that, my background was working primarily in the charity sector in leadership and management roles. So kind of a lot around, part of those roles included budgeting, funding, getting the money in accounts, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I would say I learned a lot of my commercial brain, as it were, from that. And coinciding with that, I was a member of the Junior Chamber International JCI for 9 years. So during that time, had lots of workshops from entrepreneurs, business startups, hearing about, networking skills, writing a business plan, marketing, that kind of stuff. And then worked at Doncaster Chamber for a year doing maternity cover, which is kind of gave me the first opportunity to sort of deliver to startups, and then not look back ever since, really. So yeah, it's kind of I think having that commercial brain, even if it was in the charity sector that tends to be not for profit. Yeah, and still lots to learn, but really value that experience. And I absolutely love doing the business startup courses, where you literally, I think the last course had everyone from a dog groomer to somebody wanting to set up a skate park to a landscape garden and everything in between. So that kind of different industries, but shared challenges, shared passion, and also shared nervousness. And like you say, that having that bravery and that willing to go for it. And I think if you've kind of considered all the stuff you've just talked about, if you've considered the marketplace, done your market research, done your cash flow, thought about how's it going to work, who's your target audience, there's only so much you can do. And then it does always feel a bit like a leap of faith, really. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, good question. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you so much for your time today. I'm sure that's been reassuring to many people listening, and I'm sure you'll get a few inquiries as well. But yeah, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
No trouble. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.